Yes, well, I'm sure pretty much everyone watching this program has had trauma in their family.
Earl Spencer stepped out of the high-speed rail car in central London this morning, carrying a leather portfolio stuffed with decades of sealed family correspondence. The younger brother of the late Princess Diana walked straight toward the parliamentary inquiry doors with a tight, resolute expression. His arrival follows a night of explosive media leaks, alleging that Queen Camilla actively orchestrated a targeted administrative campaign to sideline Prince William from the royal succession. As sensational documents hit the front desks of government investigators, King Charles is facing a devastating public relations crisis that threatens to tear the royal family apart from within. The arrival at Westminster Earl Spencer stepped out of the high-speed rail car onto the concrete platform of Waterloo Station. He wore a dark wool overcoat and carried a worn brown leather portfolio tucked tightly beneath his left arm. Two transit police officers stood near the sliding doors, watching commuters stream past. Spencer walked straight past them toward the main exit. He did not look at the digital departure boards flashing overhead. He pulled a silver pocket watch from his vest, glanced at the hands for 2 seconds, and strode out into the morning air. The facts are that Earl Spencer is the younger brother of the late Princess Diana and the custodian of the historical Spencer family archive held at Althorpe Estate. While members of the peerage rarely intervene directly in parliamentary inquiries, hereditary peers hold ancient constitutional rights to petition committees when state actions impact family legacies or historical records. When unverified administrative memos regarding royal succession policies surface in media leaks, the Spencer Family Archive becomes a vital repository for cross-referencing historical directives against current palace disclosures. Tension filled the waiting room of the parliamentary committee floor as Spencer handed his visitor pass to the desk guard. The guard inspected the silver crest embossed on the portfolio lock. He nodded silently and buzzed open the frosted glass inner doors. Spencer walked down the long, carpeted corridor. Portraits of former prime ministers lined both sides of the hall. He stopped outside committee room number 4. 3 television camera crews were clustered near the doorway, their red recording lights blinking in unison. The facts were that the portfolio contained a series of original typewritten letters and estate memos dated between the years 1995 and 2003. These documents had remained locked inside the Althorpe Estate vault for over 20 decades. They detailed administrative strategies developed by senior court officials to manage public perception during periods of intense royal friction. Their sudden introduction into the parliamentary inquiry shifted the focus from simple financial embezzlement to institutional manipulation of the line of succession. The mystery was how documents stored securely in a private Northamptonshire archive found their way into the hands of parliamentary investigators within 12 hours of the initial police raid at Clarence House. Earl Spencer did not typically share family correspondence with state bodies without formal legal summons. The mystery resolved when Spencer opened his portfolio for the committee clerk and pointed to a certified delivery receipt dated 2 days ago. The receipt bore the official stamp of the Metropolitan Police Evidence Unit. Detectives executing a separate warrant on a former estate secretary's London flat had uncovered photographic copies of the Althorpe letters hidden inside a desk drawer. The police seized the copies and notified Spencer, prompting him to bring the original master documents directly to Westminster to ensure their authenticity was not disputed. The facts were that the documents corroborated allegations that a coordinated administrative faction had systematically sought to diminish the public profile and official estate allocations of Prince William over a multi-year period. The memos outlined specific media strategies and budget restrictions designed to keep the prince's independent initiatives away from major funding channels. A new mystery opened as committee counsel pulled a single page from the middle of Spencer's portfolio and placed it under the overhead desk lamp. The page featured a handwritten annotation scrawled across the bottom margin in dark blue fountain pen ink. The handwriting did not match any known staff member from the Clarence House administration. Who had added the marginal note, and what did the 4-word instruction mean for the current succession inquiry? Spencer leaned over the table to inspect the ink lines. He confirmed that the handwriting belonged to a senior court advisor who had served under 2 successive monarchs before retiring to a private estate in Dorset. That advisor had maintained close ties to Queen Camilla's private office long after his official retirement from active government service. The committee chairman thanked Earl Spencer and instructed the bailiffs to secure the portfolio in the parliamentary vault. The inquiry had moved past basic financial bookkeeping into the core of royal governance. The historical documents brought forward by Diana's brother proved that internal friction was not a recent accident of bad management, but a calculated strategy spanning decades. The investigation was widening by the hour, and no one inside the palace walls was safe from the fallout. The alleged succession. Plot. A mahogany sliding door clicked open inside the secure archives room on the lower level of Westminster. Parliamentary investigator Martin Finch lifted a manila folder marked Exhibit 19 out of a steel transport box. He laid the folder flat on the green felt table. He untied the frayed cotton string holding the flaps together. Inside lay 3 typewritten pages bearing the faded purple seal of the Clarence House Administrative Directorate, dated in the year 2010. The facts are that strategic policy memos generated within royal households often outline long-term administrative priorities, public relations goals, and funding allocations for working royals. While these planning documents are standard operating procedure for managing complex estate logistics, they can also reveal internal political maneuvering when administrative factions attempt to consolidate power or redirect resources away from rival branches of the family. The documents brought forward by Earl Spencer provided a rare window into how high-level staff members sought to influence the future line of succession. Tension filled the small archive room as Finch adjusted the brass gooseneck lamp on the table. He pointed his pen at paragraph 4 on the second page. The text outlined a formal proposal to reduce the official operational budget assigned to Prince William's household staff by 20% over 3 consecutive years. The stated justification in the memo was administrative restructuring. The hidden objective, as revealed by adjacent handwritten margin notes, was to restrict the prince's public engagements and limit his growing influence across national youth charities. The facts were that the reduction policy had been actively implemented between the years 2011 and 2014. During that period, several key aides working within William's office experienced sudden budget freezes and delayed project approvals. While the policy was framed publicly as a measure of royal austerity following an economic downturn, internal records proved that other departments within the estate maintained their funding levels without interruption. The mystery was why the co-signatures at the bottom of the policy directive included not only the Queen's private secretary, but also a senior legal advisor who officially worked under the direct jurisdiction of the sovereign's private office. Bureaucratic lines of authority within the palace normally prevented cross-departmental interference of this nature. The mystery resolved when Finch cross-referenced the signature with the personnel transfer logs recovered from the recent police raid. The legal advisor had moonlighted as an unofficial liaison between Clarence House and external media consultants. His signature on the memo proved that the policy to sideline Prince William was not a localized office dispute, but a coordinated administrative strategy backed by senior figures across multiple royal households. The facts were that these typewritten memos provided the concrete link investigators needed to establish a pattern of institutional sabotage. The documents proved that the financial embezzlement uncovered earlier in the investigation was part of a larger effort to fund parallel public relations campaigns designed to elevate one branch of the family while undermining another. The financial corruption and the succession plot were 2 sides of the same coin. A new mystery opened as Finch turned to the 3rd page of Exhibit 19. The final paragraph contained a reference to a closed-door meeting held at a private country club in Berkshire on November 12, 2012. The meeting list included the names of 2 prominent national newspaper editors, alongside the Royal Administrative Director. What business did senior palace officials conduct with national journalists in a private setting regarding the future of the crown? Finch picked up his desk phone and instructed his research assistant to pull the visitor logs and media accreditation archives for that specific weekend in November. The trail of breadcrumbs was leading straight from the administrative offices of Clarence House into the editorial rooms of London's largest tabloids. The investigation was exposing how internal palace memos were systematically weaponized to shape public opinion and control the narrative of the succession. The researcher returned 10 minutes later with a slim file containing the hotel reservation receipts and phone billing records for the meeting date. The receipts confirmed that the tab for the private dining room had been paid directly using an expense account linked to the Clarence House discretionary fund. The plot to sideline the future king was not just an informal rivalry. It was an organized operation financed with public estate resources, executed in secret, and covered up for over a decade. The king's blind spot. King Charles stood by the tall arched window of his private study at Windsor Castle. He held a glass of cold water in his left hand. The afternoon light caught the edge of the crystal tumbler. Down in the courtyard below, 2 royal protection officers walked slowly past a row of parked government vehicles. The king took a single slow sip of water. He set the glass down on the mahogany windowsill with a soft click. The facts are that the private office of the sovereign is responsible for reviewing high-level administrative briefs before they reach the monarch's desk. While the king maintains ultimate constitutional authority over the royal household, day-to-day operations, memo routing, and staff appointments are managed by the private secretary and senior advisors. When sensitive documents detailing internal administrative friction or succession controversies fail to trigger internal warning flags, it points to a systemic breakdown in how information flows upward to the crown. Tension filled the quiet study as Private Secretary Sir Edward walked through the heavy double doors. He held a thick stack of printed email transcripts and parliamentary briefing papers. He stopped 3 feet away from the desk. He did not say a word. He laid the papers face down on the center of the blotter. He told the king that the morning papers had obtained complete copies of the Clarence House administrative memos brought forward by Earl Spencer.
The facts were that the leaked documents had bypassed all standard internal review protocols within the sovereign's office.
The memos, which outlined strategies to restrict Prince William's operational budgets and influence between the years 2010 and 2014, had never crossed the king's desk during that period. They had been intercepted and filed away by a lower-level administrative committee before reaching executive oversight. The mystery was how confidential files stored in secure digital servers could be leaked to national media outlets and parliamentary investigators simultaneously, without leaving an electronic audit trail inside the main palace network. Every document transmitted across internal channels typically required a verified digital signature and timestamp. The mystery resolved when Sir Edward pointed to a specific code printed at the bottom of the leaked transcript pages. The code indicated that the files had been accessed through an external terminal registered to a defunct advisory board that was dissolved back in 2015. Someone had used an old, unmonitored administrative backdoor to siphon copies of the files directly to external recipients years prior, keeping the active palace servers clean of any illicit data transfers. The facts were that the discovery exposed a massive blind spot at the very center of the royal administration. The king's personal office had been completely unaware of the parallel communication network operating beneath their feet. The revelation destroyed the illusion that the sovereign's inner circle maintained total control over internal household affairs. A new mystery opened as Sir Edward slid one final single-page memorandum across the desk toward the king. The page was dated just 3 weeks prior. It bore a typed distribution list containing the names of 3 active cabinet ministers alongside the personal secretary's private cipher. What did the recent memo discuss, and why were government ministers receiving operational updates on royal succession planning behind closed doors? Charles picked up the paper and read the first 2 lines. His expression tightened instantly. The memo outlined a contingency plan to transfer certain royal estate properties directly to a state-managed trust if the ongoing parliamentary inquiry resulted in criminal indictments against senior household staff. The government and rogue elements within the palace had been negotiating the future of crown properties behind his back for months. The king dropped the paper back onto the desk. He turned his back to the window and looked directly at his secretary. He instructed Sir Edward to summon the cabinet secretary to Windsor Castle before the end of the day. The blind spot had been exposed, and the time for passive observations was over. The crown was stepping back into the center of the political arena to take direct control of its own destiny. Sir Edward bowed his head and turned toward the exit. He reached for the brass handle of the heavy double doors. He paused for a fraction of a second before pulling them open. He told the king that the cabinet secretary was already in London and could be at the castle gates within 45 minutes. Charles nodded once. He did not offer any further instructions. He simply picked up his silver fountain pen and walked back to the center of the room. The facts are that executive channels between Whitehall and the Sovereign operate under strict constitutional protocols established over centuries. When emergency meetings are convened at Windsor Castle during an active parliamentary inquiry, it signals that standard bureaucratic procedures have broken down entirely. The civil service and the royal household were forced into direct negotiations to prevent a complete collapse of institutional stability. Tension filled the corridor outside the study as Sir Edward relayed the king's orders to the central security desk. Guards stationed at the outer gates were instructed to grant immediate, unhindered access to the government vehicle carrying the cabinet secretary. The usual protocol requiring advance notice and security clearance was bypassed completely. Every minute wasted allowed the unauthorized factions more time to cover their tracks across the regional administrative offices. The facts were that the parallel administrative network had penetrated deep into the civil service departments responsible for land registration and tax exemptions. The memos brought forward by Earl Spencer were only the surface layer of a much larger web of influence. For over a decade, unelected officials had managed a shadow operation designed to dictate estate allocations without interference from either the king or Parliament. The mystery was why the cabinet secretary had kept the existence of this shadow operation hidden from the sovereign while participating in its inner meetings. A high-ranking civil servant owes dual allegiance to the crown and the elected government. Facilitating a clandestine property transfer scheme violated every foundational rule of the British Constitution. The mystery resolved when Sir Edward remembered a confidential memo he had archived 2 years ago regarding departmental funding cuts. The government had threatened to slash the civil service pension fund unless the palace agreed to quietly reassign 3 major commercial land holdings to a state-controlled development corporation. The shadow operation was not just a royal palace conspiracy. It was a joint leverage play orchestrated by bureaucrats seeking to strip assets away from the crown. The facts were that the revelation completely redefined the scope of the crisis. It was no longer a simple family dispute over succession policies or personal animosity between royal factions. It was an institutional power grab, utilizing leaked documents and manufactured scandals to force the monarchy into submission. A new mystery opened as a heavy black Daimler sedan swept through the main gates of Windsor Castle and pulled up beneath the stone archway. The vehicle doors opened and 2 senior government advisors stepped out onto the cobblestones. They carried thick aluminum briefcases and did not look at the cameras filming from outside the perimeter fence. Who had tipped off the press about the secret ministerial arrival before the car even crossed the castle moat? Sir Edward watched the arrival from the second-floor gallery window. He realized that the leak was coming from inside the government delegation itself. Someone within Whitehall wanted the negotiations to fail, pushing the monarchy and Parliament into open, unresolvable conflict. The blind spot was not just inside the palace walls. It extended right into the heart of government administration in Whitehall. The king walked out of his private study and joined his secretary in the gallery. He looked down at the Daimler idling in the courtyard. He told Sir Edward to let the advisors in through the side entrance, away from the media lenses. The trap had been laid, but Charles had no intention of walking into it blindly. The confrontation in the royal study was about to begin, and the future of the crown depended on every word spoken in the next hour. William's calculated response. A heavy oak door pushed open inside Kensington Palace. Prince William walked into the secure briefing room. He wore a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms. 2 senior legal advisors sat at the long mahogany table. They looked up as he crossed the room. William did not sit down immediately. He placed his palms flat on the wood and leaned over a printed copy of the leaked administrative memos. The facts are that the Prince of Wales maintains an independent legal and operational office distinct from both Buckingham Palace and Clarence House. When systemic administrative leaks and historical succession memos surface in public inquiries, The prince's legal team possesses the authority to initiate immediate defensive countermeasures. These actions include filing emergency injunctions, auditing private estate accounts, and securing independent forensic copies of all internal correspondence. Tension filled the small room as lead attorney Marcus Vance slid a fresh court document across the table. The paper featured the official seal of the High Court of Justice. Vance told the prince that the emergency injunction had been signed just 20 minutes earlier. The injunction froze all remaining discretionary assets and property transfers linked to the administrative network named in Earl Spencer's archive. The facts were that the legal countermeasure bypassed traditional palace arbitration channels entirely. By filing directly through the civil courts, William's team short-circuited the attempts by rogue officials to quietly reassign estate properties before the parliamentary inquiry reached its final conclusions. The maneuver ensured that every questionable asset remained locked under judicial oversight. The mystery was how the legal team had managed to identify the exact bank routing numbers used by the shadow administrative network without having prior access to the Clarence House internal servers. Those accounts had been hidden behind layers of offshore shell companies for over a decade. The mystery resolved when Vance pointed to a handwritten ledger entry attached to the court petition. The principal accountant, who had confessed at Scotland Yard, had provided the decryption keys for the secondary offshore accounts during his second round of police interviews. Those keys gave investigators direct access to the digital ledger, tracking every unauthorized transfer executed by the administrative faction. The facts were that the decrypted data revealed a direct financial link between the succession plot memos and the hidden offshore accounts. The funds used to finance the negative media campaigns against William's office had been drawn straight from estate maintenance reserves. The financial embezzlement and the political smear campaign were funded by the exact same source. A new mystery opened as William picked up a single blue file folder from the corner of the table. The folder contained a list of 12 active staff members currently employed within the Clarence House administrative wing. Who had authorized their continued employment after the initial police raids concluded? Vance checked the personnel renewal stamps on the documents. The signatures belonged to a junior undersecretary who had been quietly reassigned to a regional office in Scotland 2 days after the scandal broke. The network was not dead. It was actively repositioning its key players away from London to evade the expanding scope of the judicial investigation. William closed the blue folder with a sharp snap. He told his legal team to expand the injunction to cover every regional administrative office across the United Kingdom. There would be no safe harbors left for the conspirators. The calculated response had slammed shut the financial escape routes, and the net was tightening around the final architects of the plot. The Spencer family archive. A heavy iron latch clicked open inside the underground vault beneath Althorpe Estate. Earl Spencer pulled a wooden storage crate out from the bottom shelf. The surface of the crate was covered in a thin layer of gray dust. He unbuckled 2 leather straps on the front panel and lifted the lid. Inside sat 3 rows of dark cloth-bound notebooks. Each notebook bore a handwritten label, written in black ink by the 9th Earl Spencer back in 1984. The facts are that private family archives maintained by the Spencer family span over 5 centuries of British political and social history. These documents are stored in climate-controlled vaults beneath the ancestral home in Northamptonshire. While estate papers are traditionally regarded as private personal property, hereditary peers possess ancient legal rights to submit historical records to parliamentary committees when those documents directly clarify matters of state governance, institutional policy, or hereditary succession disputes. Tension filled the quiet vault as Spencer picked up the center notebook from the middle row. The paper pages were yellowed at the edges. He carried the book over to the oak examination table beneath the overhead spotlight. He opened the cover to a page dated October 12, 1998. The page contained handwritten notes detailing secret meetings between senior royal advisors and newspaper executives regarding public perception, strategies for the young princes. The facts were that these historical notebooks provided an unbroken chain of evidence proving that media strategy and institutional maneuvering had been used for decades to manage public sentiment around the royal succession. The notes recorded specific dates, names of participating officials, and explicit instructions on how to handle press inquiries concerning estate funding divisions. The mystery was why these particular notebooks had been separated from the main administrative correspondence files and hidden in a secondary vault beneath the estate floorboards instead of being filed in the main estate library. Normal record-keeping protocols require all official political correspondence to be cataloged in central archive indexes. The mystery resolved when Spencer pointed to a small, folded index card tucked into the back cover of the notebook. The card was written in his late father's handwriting. It stated that these specific notes had been removed from a government filing cabinet in Whitehall during the autumn of 1999 to protect family members from targeted political retaliation. The historical documents had been preserved as an insurance policy against future institutional attacks. The facts were that the notebooks verified every single allegation made in the leaked Clarence House memos. The strategy of using administrative pressure and media influence to sideline rival branches of the family was not a modern invention of recent advisors. It was a well-documented playbook that had been refined over 30 years of institutional management. A new mystery opened as Spencer turned to the final page of the 1998 notebook. The page had a clean, horizontal tear across the center. The bottom half of the sheet was completely missing. Who had torn the final section out of the historic record, and what critical name or instruction was written on the missing half? Spencer checked the adjacent pages for carbon transfer marks or indentation impressions left by a pen nib. He pressed a soft lead pencil against a blank sheet of paper and rubbed it gently across the wooden table surface beneath where the page had rested. Faint outlines of letters began to emerge through the graphite shading. The word visible on the impression was a surname belonging to a former Lord Chancellor who had served during the late 90s. The puzzle pieces were clicking into place with absolute clarity. The historical archive proved that the current crisis was rooted in decades of systemic institutional manipulation. Spencer closed the notebook, latched the wooden crate, and picked up his phone to notify the parliamentary committee that the complete historical record was ready for transport to London. The past had caught up with the present, and the full truth was finally coming to light. A crown divided. A heavy wooden demonstration placard clattered against the stone paving stones outside the front gates of Buckingham Palace. A police barrier rattled as 300 protesters pushed forward against the metal line. Sirens wailed in the distance, echoing off the neoclassical facade of the royal residence. A light drizzle began to fall, darkening the wool coats of the crowd. A protester hoisted a cardboard sign high into the air. The painted letters read, "Absolute accountability now." The facts are that public demonstrations outside royal residences are rare occurrences in modern British history, typically triggered only by profound constitutional or political crises. When parliamentary inquiries expose systemic financial corruption and internal institutional plots involving senior royal figures, public trust erodes rapidly across all social demographics. The convergence of Earl Spencer's historical archive disclosures and the High Court asset freezes transformed an administrative scandal into a full-scale national debate over the future of the monarchy. Tension filled the press briefing room across the street from the palace gates as a senior television correspondent adjusted his microphone. Camera crews scrambled to set up their lenses as a live feed flickered onto the monitors. The broadcast showed the growing crowds pressing against the security perimeters. The reporter announced that 3 separate anti-monarchy groups had called for an emergency constitutional convention in Trafalgar Square later that afternoon. The facts were that the leadership of the Labour and Liberal Democrat parties held an emergency meeting in Whitehall to discuss whether to introduce a parliamentary motion for a comprehensive review of the Sovereign Grant Act. The political consensus that had protected royal funding mechanisms for decades was completely fractured. Lawmakers who had previously defended royal exemptions were now facing intense pressure from their constituents to vote in favor of strict state oversight. The mystery was why Buckingham Palace communications officers had maintained absolute silence for 72 hours, refusing to issue even a standard holding statement regarding the growing public unrest outside the gates. In past crises, the press office typically moved within hours to calm public anxiety with carefully worded assurances. The mystery resolved when an internal palace memo leaked to the Evening News revealed that senior press aides had been locked out of their digital communication channels by order of the Lord Chamberlain. The palace administrative apparatus was completely paralyzed by infighting, with different factions offering contradictory advice on how to respond to the unfolding legal siege. The facts were that the administrative paralysis left the monarchy entirely without an active defense mechanism. While Prince William's legal team acted decisively through the courts and King Charles summoned cabinet ministers to Windsor Castle, the central institution of Buckingham Palace remained exposed and defenseless against the relentless wave of public criticism. A new mystery opened as a dark government limousine pulled away from the side exit of the palace courtyard. The vehicle carried the cabinet secretary back toward Whitehall after a 3-hour closed-door meeting with the king. Who leaked the departure time of the limousine to the protest organizers, allowing them to block the exit gates with banners and chants. Police officers quickly formed a tight wedge formation around the vehicle, pushing the front row of demonstrators back from the bumper. The limousine crept forward at a walking pace through the dense sea of placards. The confrontation in the streets mirrored the political battle raging inside the halls of power. The crown was divided against itself, caught between the demands of public accountability and the stubborn weight of centuries-old tradition. The Daimler cleared the gates and accelerated down the wet asphalt toward Parliament Square. The demonstrators remained gathered outside the perimeter, chanting slogans that echoed across the gravel forecourt. Inside the palace walls, the lights remained on in the upper floor offices as advisors worked through the night. The final outcome of the crisis hung in the balance, waiting for the parliamentary inquiry to deliver its ultimate verdict on the future of the British throne. The heavy iron gates of the sovereign's residence groaned on their greased hinges as a convoy of police vans entered the courtyard. Rain dripped from the dark stone pillars onto the uniform caps of the duty guards standing at attention. Inside the main entrance hall, 3 junior footmen hurried across the marble floor, carrying crates of secured documents destined for the Parliamentary Records Office. The domestic rhythm of the estate had been completely displaced by the mechanical efficiency of the state investigation. The facts are that structural divisions within the royal household run deep along historical lines of allegiance. When executive oversight collapses under the weight of judicial subpoenas, different branches of the royal family often adopt competing strategies to protect their individual interests. While Clarence House sought to isolate its operations behind closed doors, and Kensington Palace launched direct legal defenses through the civil courts, Buckingham Palace was left to absorb the full weight of public condemnation without an effective communication strategy. Tension hung in the vaulted gallery of the Central Administration Wing as the chief archivist cataloged the final boxes of estate records seized under the High Court warrant. Every shelf in the reference library was tagged with numbered yellow markers. The archivists worked in absolute silence, their movements restricted by 2 police officers stationed near the arched doorway. The physical paper trail of decades of royal administration was being packed away into cardboard containers for public inspection. The facts were that the division inside the royal household extended beyond administrative departments into the very core of family relationships. Personal loyalties had shattered overnight as advisors, secretaries, and legal teams scrambled to secure individual immunity deals with federal prosecutors. The collective unity that had protected the institution from public scrutiny for generations was replaced by individual survival tactics. The mystery was why no senior member of the royal family had stepped forward to deliver a televised address to the nation during the height of the institutional crisis. Traditionally, the sovereign addresses the public directly during moments of profound national trauma or constitutional uncertainty to restore calm and reaffirm national unity. The mystery resolved when a confidential memorandum from the Lord Chamberlain's office was published by the national broadcaster. The memo revealed that the king's personal medical advisors had advised against a live television broadcast due to the unpredictable nature of the ongoing police investigations and the risk of contradicting active court proceedings. The Crown was legally gagged by its own legal counselors to prevent prejudicing the pending criminal trials of former staff members. The facts were that this silence was interpreted by the public as a sign of weakness and institutional guilt. Without a reassuring voice from the throne, the vacuum was filled by speculative media reports, leaked government memos, and aggressive commentary from political opponents in Parliament. The division between the monarchy and the public widened with every passing hour of radio silence. A new mystery opened as a senior parliamentary researcher discovered a missing ledger entry in the financial records of the Duchy of Cornwall dating back to the year 2008. The entry recorded a multi-million-pound property transaction involving an unregistered offshore holding company. Who authorized the transfer of Duchy funds into an external account without the required parliamentary disclosure signatures? The researcher flagged the anomaly and forwarded the digital file directly to the lead investigator heading the Financial Fraud Task Force at Scotland Yard. The investigation was no longer confined to Clarence House administrative files. It was digging into the ancient revenue streams of the royal estates themselves. Every corner of the financial architecture was being exposed to the harsh light of judicial scrutiny. The police officers in the courtyard adjusted their raincoats as a fresh wave of demonstrators arrived at the perimeter fence, carrying banners emblazoned with slogans demanding total financial transparency. The rain continued to fall across London, washing the stone steps of the palace clean of debris. Inside the historic halls, the divisions among staff, family members, and state officials remained absolute and unbridgeable. The ancient institution was fighting for its survival on multiple fronts simultaneously, with no guarantee that the crown would emerge intact from the crucible of modern accountability. The unprecedented crisis facing the British monarchy has laid bare the deep fractures between ancient privilege and modern accountability. What began as a financial audit at Clarence House transformed into an institutional earthquake, pulling in Earl Spencer's historical archives, high court asset seizures, and fierce public protests outside palace gates. With King Charles facing intense political pressure, Prince William deploying decisive legal countermeasures, and the crown deeply divided from within, the institution has reached its ultimate crossroads.